My stepdaughters said I clung because I'm scared to be alone. I pulled them off my insurance, stopped covering the rent, and flew away solo. Now loneliness is their reality. Subscribe to the channel and share your stories in the comments. And now let's get started. It started with quiet sacrifice. That's how most things rot. Slowly, almost reverently, like a house collapsing from termites you never see. I was 43, an architect. Years in the field taught me how to hold up ceilings that wanted to fall. I thought that made me ready for family. Helen came with 2 daughters, Ellie, 15, and Grace, 12. I married all 3 of them, really. Tom, their biological father, was a phantom who blew in on birthdays and holidays with empty hands and a grin that never reached his eyes. I filled the gaps. I paid rent, covered tuition, sat in ER waiting rooms during fevers and sprained ankles. I brought home groceries, repaired the dishwasher, taught them how to calculate interest rates and check tire pressure. I believed presence could rewrite blood, that showing up could earn something like love. But love in that house had a hierarchy I could never climb. It didn't fall apart all at once. It splintered, in dinner table silences and bathroom doors that no longer opened when I knocked. Ellie, once bubbly and warm, started seasoning every sentence with sarcasm. "Wow, Michael, do you practice these lectures?" She'd sneer when I tried to guide. Grace, sweet Grace, began locking her bedroom at night. I heard the bolt slide as I walked past her door. That sound became a verdict. Helen saw it. She had to. But she dismissed it with that weary softness I had come to know too well. "They're just growing up," she said once, when Ellie refused to say goodnight. "It's not about you." But it was about me. It had always been about me. I wasn't their father, but I had paid every price as if I were. And still, something in them recoiled from me like I was counterfeit. It began subtly. The way Grace flinched when I reached for her coat. The way Ellie would only laugh when her real father texted. Not with joy, but with relief. As if his absence made him immune to fault. As if I, simply by being there, had committed some crime. They called me Michael. Never Dad. Never even stepdad. Just Michael, sharp, clear, distant. I told myself names were just labels. But when you spend years folding towels for a girl who won't speak to you unless she needs a ride, you begin to understand how names can wound. I remember one afternoon in early spring. Ellie had missed the bus home, and Helen was stuck in a meeting, so I went to pick her up. She stepped into the car with her headphones in, not a glance in my direction. I tried to start a conversation, asked about her classes, her track meet, whether she liked her new chemistry teacher. She pulled one earbud out. "Are we done?" she asked. Not cruel, not loud. Just bored. Just disinterested. I drove in silence after that. The road blurred. The silence grew teeth. That night, I told Helen I felt like a stranger in my own car. She kissed my cheek. "Teenage girls are like that," she said. But I remembered her being 16 once. We met when she was 35, but she told stories. Her father had died young. Her mother remarried. And Helen hated him. "He tried too hard," she once told me. Like we were some puzzle he could solve with a hammer. I asked what changed. "Nothing," she said. "He just stopped trying." That story used to make me sad. Now it made me cautious. I didn't want to become that man. The one who gives up. The one who folds into himself and calls it peace. But something inside me had begun to echo. The house, once warm with effort, felt colder now. My presence didn't matter. My absence wouldn't be noticed. Even the dog, Max, who used to wait by the door when I came home, started curling at the feet of Ellie instead. I don't know when that shift happened. But one day, I opened the door and Max didn't move. Just opened one eye and went back to sleep. The rhythms were breaking. The rituals unraveling. Sunday pancakes became rushed breakfasts. Movie nights became 3 screens glowing in 3 separate rooms. We lived together, but we had stopped sharing a life. One night, I sat alone on the porch. The sky was bruised with stars. The wind was soft. Inside, I heard the girls laughing in Grace's room. I stood to listen. They were joking about me. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard enough. He thinks he's so wise. Did you see the way he burned the chicken last night? Laughter, cackling, a chorus of mockery. And then, I bet he's just scared we'll leave him. That's why he tries so hard. That was Ellie. I know her voice. Then Grace, laughing. He acts like we owe him or something. They laughed again. That high, unkind laughter that only teenage girls can perfect. Laughter that doesn't know what it kills. I stepped back from the window. The boards creaked under my weight. For a moment I thought about knocking, about walking in and demanding an apology. But I didn't. I stood there in the dark, invisible, listening. And in that moment, something in me shifted. Something broke, not with a bang, but with the soft, unmistakable sigh of surrender. I was not their father, and I never would be. The worst wounds don't come from war. They come from kitchens, living rooms, laughter behind closed doors. After the night I heard them mock me, I stopped asking for anything. I didn't bring it up with Helen. What would I say? That I was wounded by the giggles of two teenage girls? That I had spent years building a life only to be reduced to a punchline? No, I held it in, like everything else. But I began watching. Patterns became clearer. At dinner, Ellie stared at her phone and only looked up to ask, "Did real dad text you today, Mom?" Not my name. Not even a glance in my direction. Grace, once quiet but sweet, followed her sister's lead now. Mimicked the sneer, the eye roll, the shrug. Cooked, cleaned, paid bills. And they mocked the man who fed them. Still, I clung to something that resembled dignity. Some nights, I told myself it was just a phase. That years from now, they'd look back and see who held the house together. That they'd feel shame, regret. That they'd apologize, late maybe, but genuine. But it never came. In fact, the mockery grew sharper. It happened on a Thursday. Late. Helen was asleep. The girls didn't know I was still awake. I had gone into my office, door closed, lights out. The kind of hiding you do when you just need the house to forget you for a while. That's when I heard Ellie's voice. She was on a video call in the hallway. The kind of conversation kids assume is private just because it's casual. "No, it's pathetic," she said, laughing. "He tries so hard. He just clings to us because he's afraid of being alone." A beat, a laugh. Then Grace, in the background. "Yeah, he acts like we owe him something." That was it. Not shouted. Not cruel. Just matter of fact. But that was the moment I stopped being a man in his home. I became a wallet, a ghost, a joke. I didn't open the door. I didn't confront them. I didn't yell. I sat there, in the dark, for another hour, letting those words soak into the foundation I had once thought was mine. Then I stood up, quietly, steadily, and began to undo my life. At 4:15 a.m., I opened my laptop, logged in to our health insurance portal. I removed Grace and Ellie from the family plan. No anger, just clicks. Grace had braces. Ellie had therapy bills. I had been paying for both without question. Not anymore. I logged into our rent payment system. For years, I had covered the entirety of it. Helen's name on the lease, mine on the transactions. I canceled the autopay, notified the landlord, said I was stepping away, asked that they send the next invoice directly to Helen. Then I pulled up the spreadsheet I had kept all these years. A list of every bill, every school fee, every birthday gift, every late-night Uber, every summer camp, thousands of dollars, lines and lines of numbers, not out of pride, but out of necessity. When you carry an entire household on your back, you learn to account for the weight. I stared at that document for a long time. Then I closed it and booked a one-way ticket. Nowhere exotic, just far. Place with silence. With mountains, maybe. A place where no one knew who I was. Where no one would look at me with inherited contempt. The sun was just starting to rise when I wrote the note. I tore a sheet from a yellow legal pad. No greeting, no goodbye, just one line. "You said I'm afraid of loneliness. Let's find out." I left it on the kitchen table. I didn't pack much, just enough for a month. Enough to remind myself I existed outside this house. enough to start over or at least to breathe. By 7 a.m., I was gone. No slamming doors. No confrontation. Just silence, left behind like a scent. I turned off my phone during the layover. Let it die in my bag. I imagined Helen waking up, finding the note. I imagined her reading it, eyebrows raised, not quite understanding yet. I imagined the girls yawning their way to the fridge, not even noticing I was gone until something inconvenienced them. The Wi-Fi, maybe. Or the missing coffee filters. Or the car keys. And when the rent came due, when the dentist called for Grace's next payment, when the counselor asked about Ellie's coverage, they would know. I was gone. And more than that, I had withdrawn. Not in anger. Not in punishment. In clarity. There's a difference between being absent and being done. One is temporary. The other is freedom. I sat by the window of the plane and watched the clouds cut the sky in half. I thought about how often I had rationalized their coldness. Teenagers are cruel. It's not about you. They'll grow out of it. But what if they didn't? What if I was just the scaffolding they leaned on until they no longer needed to pretend I mattered? Helen had let it happen. She had watched them reject me and offered no shield. No expectation. No boundary. Her silence was a choice. And so was mine. In that moment, 30,000 feet above the life I had built, I realized something awful and clean. I had been loyal to a family that had never been loyal to me. They didn't break me with violence. They broke me with indifference, with slow dismissal, with laughter that assumed I would never leave. But I did. I left not because I hated them. I left because I finally loved myself more than the scraps they offered. They say people only appreciate what they lose. That's wrong. Some people don't even know what they had until the consequences come wrapped in finality, in silence, in statements that don't need to be shouted. I didn't expect an apology. I didn't expect regret. But I did expect reality to arrive. And it did. Fast. The first message came 2 days after I left. Helen, just a question. Did you change the rent payment? The portal says it's overdue. No greeting. No concern. Just confusion that the machine stopped running. That the man who greased the gears had stepped away from the engine room. I didn't reply. That night she called. 3 times. I let the phone ring in the hotel drawer. Outside, the wind curled down the mountain in soft, slow sighs. I sat on the balcony, a cup of black coffee cooling in my hands, and listened to the sound of a life that didn't require my fixing. Day 4, a text from Ellie. My therapist said the payment bounced. Did something happen? I stared at it for a while. The way she phrased it, not you stopped paying, but something happened. As if I were the error. A glitch in the system. I didn't respond. Later that night, Helen tried again. This time, longer. Michael, I don't know what's going on. You just left? The girls are confused. I'm confused. Grace needs her ortho visit rescheduled. I tried to log into the insurance. It says she's not covered. Can we talk? Please. Please. The first time she'd used that word in a long, long time. I poured another drink. Let the room grow dark. I didn't answer. By day 7, the panic began to fray at the edges. Helen's tone changed. Shorter now. Sharper. You made your point. Can you stop punishing us? Whatever this is, it's too far. Be an adult. Be an adult. As if the past 8 years of bills and sacrifice had been childish tantrums. As if walking away from contempt was immaturity. But the real shift came with the letter. A week and a half after I left, a small envelope arrived at the lodge. No return address. My name printed in block letters. Inside, lined paper. Written by hand. Grace. Michael, you don't have to read this. You probably won't. But Mom said you're not answering. And Ellie keeps acting like she's not scared. But she is. We both are. We thought you'd never leave. That's the truth. We thought we could say anything and you'd still be there. We thought you were too kind. And we took that for granted. I don't know what happens next. I just wanted to say, I get it now. You didn't owe us anything. You just gave anyway. And we didn't say thank you. I'm sorry. Grace. The words didn't undo the hurt. but they acknowledged it. Quietly, without pride, without excuse. I read it twice, then set it aside. The next day Ellie called. Not a text, not a sarcastic voicemail. A call. I let it ring. Then curiosity or something weaker got the better of me. I picked up. Silence. Breathing. Then, "It's me," she said. The voice was smaller. Not the Ellie who threw daggers at the dinner table. This one sounded like a girl again. "I know you hate us right now, maybe forever, and I can't blame you, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't speak. You did everything for us," she continued, voice cracking. "And I was awful to you. We were awful. I don't know why. I think maybe it was easier to be cruel than admit we needed you." Still, I said nothing. "I used to laugh when you left notes on the fridge," she whispered. "Stupid reminders. Milk, dog food. But I saved one once. The one where you wrote, 'Love you all, even when you're monsters.'" She choked a little. Then, "You didn't deserve what we gave you. You deserved better than all of us." I waited until the silence felt like a closing door. Then I spoke. "Did you mean it?" I asked. Another pause. Then, "Yes. Do you still think I was just clinging to you?" Longer pause. "No. I think you were the only one who ever stayed." Then nothing. No promises. No demands. Just stillness. I hung up first. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like walking through the ashes of a fire you spent years keeping lit, only to watch the people around it spit into the flames. They had burned the bridge. Now they were trying to crawl across the smoke. But I didn't rush back, because that was the point. For years I had built the house, bought the meals, fixed the leaks, absorbed the scorn, and I believed, stupidly, that consistency would buy me a seat at the table. Instead, I'd been eating scraps beside it. Their father, Tom, didn't step in. That was the part that stung more than anything. They had wielded his name like a sword every time I corrected them, every time I asked for respect. "Real dad lets us. Real dad wouldn't care. You're not him." And now, when they needed real help, he was gone. Helen called him, I know. Desperate voices carry through walls. I heard her say, "They need you to cover tuition. It's overdue." Heard her pause. Then hiss, "Well, what do you mean you can't?" Of course he couldn't. He never could. And deep down, I think she always knew. But she let them believe the myth because it spared her from having to defend me. Now the myth had a bill stapled to its forehead, and they were scrambling to pay. I stayed in that lodge for another week. I didn't respond to the daily messages. Not to Helen's growing list of logistical panics. Not to Ellie's quiet confessions. Not even to Grace's second letter. Tear-stained this time. A page and a half about a field trip I once chaperoned where she'd felt like someone finally showed up for me. I kept them all, folded neatly, tucked into a drawer. But I didn't answer, because here's what no one likes to say out loud. Forgiveness doesn't arrive on demand. Not after years of mockery. Not after silence. Sometimes the apology comes too late. Sometimes the damage is already carved into the foundation. A month passed before I returned. Not home. Not really. Just to the same city, the same streets, the same ghosts wearing familiar faces. The mountains had started to thaw when I left the lodge, and the snowmelt trailed along the roads like veins of silver. It felt poetic somehow, everything dissolving, everything running away from what it used to be. I didn't go back to the house. Couldn't. Instead, I rented a small apartment above a hardware store downtown. Bare walls, one chair, a mattress on the floor. The kind of place where the silence doesn't echo because there's nothing for it to bounce off. I liked that. The simplicity of absence. The weightlessness of not being needed. The first few nights, I expected to feel regret. The ache of missing Helen's footsteps in the hallway. Grace's humming from behind her door. Ellie's music bleeding through the walls. But instead, I slept. Deeply. Like a man who'd been holding his breath for 8 years and finally exhaled. Freedom isn't joy. It's quiet. It's the absence of begging. The calls didn't stop, though. Helen's number blinked across the screen every few days, alternating between guilt and anger. "We're barely keeping up," one message said. The girls miss you. Another, you proved your point. Can you come back now? The third one came with tears she couldn't hide. I can't do this alone. You don't have to move in, just help me. I never replied, because it wasn't about proving a point anymore. It was about acknowledging truth. When you build a house, you know when the foundation is cracked beyond repair. You can plaster the walls, repaint the rooms, fill the air with flowers, but the rot stays underneath, invisible until it collapses. That's what we were, a structure pretending to be stable. I walked past the old house one evening. The blinds were drawn, but I saw silhouettes moving inside. A man's voice, not mine, Tom's. He was there finally, filling the vacancy he'd left years ago. For a moment, I almost laughed. The prodigal father returning not for love, but for necessity. He had come to rescue what he had abandoned, because there was no one else left to bear the weight. But even through the distance, I could tell it wasn't working. There's a rhythm to dysfunction. Once it knows your address, it always finds its way home. His voice rose. Helen's followed. A slammed door. Ellie's silhouette pacing. Grace crying quietly in the corner. And me outside unseen, realizing that I was witnessing the family they had chosen for themselves. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt clean. The next day I met with a lawyer. Not out of vengeance, just practicality. I needed to close the accounts, detach my name from the debts that weren't mine anymore. I signed documents until my hand cramped. Tuition loans, medical plans, co-leases, credit cards. All of it severed. The lawyer glanced at me once and said, "Most men take years to get to this point." I said nothing. I just signed. Afterward, I walked out into the sunlight. The city was loud, chaotic, full of strangers with their own griefs. I felt invisible in the best possible way. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at my new address. Helen's handwriting. Inside, just one page. No accusations this time, no begging. Just honesty. Michael, I don't know how to explain what's happened. The girls and I are trying. Tom came back, but he's not staying. He says he can't afford to. I think he's ashamed, but it's hard to tell. Ellie's working part-time now. Grace keeps asking when you'll call. I don't know what to tell her. I understand now what you meant about loneliness. It isn't punishment, is it? It's the only piece left when everything else has been used up. I hope you're okay. I really do. H. I read it twice, then folded it back into the envelope. I didn't write back. There was nothing left to say. She had reached her own understanding, and I wasn't the man who needed to guide her anymore. A few nights later, I walked down to the river. The air smelled of rain and electricity. Across the water, city lights flickered like false promises. I thought about every bill I had paid, every quiet morning I had spent making breakfast for a family that looked right past me. I thought about Ellie's voice. He just clings to us because he's afraid of being alone. And how, in the end, she had been half right. I had been afraid. Afraid that if I stopped giving, I would disappear. That my worth was measured only in what I provided. But the truth was simpler, crueler, and more freeing than that. I didn't disappear when I left. They did. The family I built dissolved without the scaffolding I provided. And maybe that was inevitable. Maybe it was the lesson I had refused to learn, that love cannot be bought with sacrifice, and respect cannot be traded for stability. Grace sent one more letter. No envelope this time, just a folded piece of paper slipped under my apartment door. She must have found the address through her mother. It was short. I get it now. Real dad left again. Mom's working nights. Ellie says she hates everyone, but I think she hates herself. I miss the way you made things feel safe. I wish I had said thank you when it still mattered. I kept that one. Not because I wanted to forgive, but because it reminded me that lessons are rarely gentle. Some are learned only through loss. I never went back to them. I saw them once more, by accident, at a grocery store downtown. Helen in line with a cart full of coupons. Grace quiet beside her. Ellie scrolling her phone. They didn't see me. I could have said something. I could have broken the distance. But I didn't. The silence between us wasn't cruel anymore. It was earned. I left the store before they reached the counter. Stepped into the cool air, the sound of traffic and rain merging into one endless hum. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a man who'd been abandoned. I felt like a man who had finally stepped outside his own prison. Loneliness, I learned, isn't emptiness. The space reclaimed. It's the sound of your own breath returning to you after years of shouting into rooms that never echoed back. Helen and the girls would survive. Maybe they'd even grow. Maybe, one day, they'd speak of me not as the man who left, but as the one who finally stopped trying to fix what refused to be mended. But that's not my story anymore. Mine ends here, with a rented apartment, a quiet mind, and the knowledge that love without respect is just servitude dressed as virtue. So I ask you now, the reader, the witness, the stranger walking past the ruins of someone else's home, if you were in my place, would you have stayed? Would you have kept paying for your own erasure, smiling through mockery, pretending it was love? Or would you have walked away too? Because in the end, I didn't choose loneliness. I chose freedom.